is either haunted, cursed.
Beneath the rotting beams of a forgotten farmhouse in Rhode Island lies something older than legend, something time itself tried to bury. Known to the world as the Conjuring House, its legacy stretches far beyond Hollywood fiction. But what if the most terrifying parts were never dramatized on screen? Some whispers were too quiet, some shadows too subtle, and some horrors too real. Before the chilling fame, before the Perron family's arrival, this house held secrets layered in centuries of silence. And as many have since discovered, it wasn't the screams that stayed with them. It was the eerie, suffocating quiet afterward. Before the Perrons, the old Arnold estate was already a theater of unexplained tragedies. Generations of the Arnold family lived and died on the property, each leaving behind more questions than answers. From hangings to drownings to unexplained deaths, a dark cloud seemed to linger over its soil. One death in particular, that of Mrs. John Arnold, who allegedly ended her life at 93, still unsettles researchers. Though buried beneath dust and superstition, even the skeptics begin to wonder, how many coincidences does it take before a pattern becomes a curse? Bathsheba Sherman's name often rises from the shadows surrounding this tale. Accused of child killing and witchcraft in the 1800s, her legend took root in the twisted narrative of the house. Though she lived on a nearby farm and had no direct ties to the estate, the 2013 film amplified her role, merging fiction with fear in the public's mind. But a deeper question haunts the silence. Is the house drawing these stories in, or giving them life? Critics say it's dramatization for the masses, but those who've stepped inside often leave changed, some shaken, some silent. The house doesn't scream, it listens. When the Perrons arrived in 1971, they weren't chasing ghosts. Roger and Carolyn Perron sought a new start with their 5 daughters, drawn in by the charm of the colonial-era farmhouse and its wide 8.5-acre sprawl. Yet from day one, the house pushed back. A neighbor's cryptic farewell, "Keep the lights on, all night," was brushed off with a laugh until darkness fell. Objects disappeared, only to return in new places. Doors opened on their own. Even the family dog, usually fearless, refused to enter certain parts of the home. These weren't just oddities. They were warnings. For Carolyn, the signs grew personal. Her broom vanished repeatedly. Dirt piles formed without explanation, and a sense of being watched became constant. The children began experiencing things that logic couldn't explain. Sounds with no source, glimpses of figures in mirrors, the sensation of invisible hands brushing past. The youngest, Cindy, often broke down when toys moved on their own, or whispers echoed from empty rooms. Nights became the family's greatest enemy. Fear soaked the walls, and even Andrea, the eldest, would wake to her sisters crying from dread. This was no longer a quirky old house. It was something else, something alive. Yet, not all the spirits seemed cruel. Early on, the girls experienced what felt like maternal presences, gentle, nurturing entities that would tuck them in at night and kiss their foreheads. Andrea remembered the floral scent that lingered afterward, distinctly different from their mother's usual aroma. These spirits, they believed, were caretakers, echoes of past residents perhaps too attached to leave. The children spoke of these visits with an odd kind of comfort, and even the family began to see their experiences as part of the house's strange rhythm. But like any deceptive calm, it wouldn't last. And then came the chilling shift. One night, Cindy confided in Andrea that she heard voices whispering that 7 dead soldiers are buried in the walls. The words clung to the walls like damp, refusing to fade, specific, haunting, and far too vivid to ignore. It wasn't the usual strange sound or harmless apparition. This was a message. Real or imagined, it marked a turning point. The house was no longer just haunted. It hinted at a violent, hidden history buried not just beneath the floorboards, but within the very walls. Suddenly, every creak felt like a footstep, every draft like a breath. The house had stories, yes, but perhaps it had secrets too deep for even spirits to tell. Theories abound. Could the estate be a burial ground for restless souls from America's early conflicts? The area's colonial history gives credence to the claim. And what if these spirits weren't malicious by choice, but trapped, unheard, unresolved? Some believe these soldiers are tethered by injustice, their spirits stirring only when silence becomes unbearable. One chilling detail made the parents consider the impossible. If these walls could talk, they'd whisper of war, betrayal, and death. And Cindy, barely old enough to understand the weight of such history, was now its unwilling messenger. As time passed, the tension in the house sharpened. The comforting spirits either vanished or were overpowered by more hostile entities. Affection turned to aggression. Whispers became growls. Doors no longer creaked, they slammed. Andrea later described the sensation of being watched with hatred, not curiosity. And still, the house stood silent during the day, as if gathering its strength for nightfall. Every night became a battlefield, and sleep was no longer refuge, but surrender. The Perrons had walked into a dream of rural life and found themselves imprisoned in a nightmare. The world eventually learned of their ordeal. But what most don't realize is that their haunting was not just about ghosts. It was about grief, history, and the invisible scars people and places carry. The old Arnold estate wasn't merely haunted, it was alive with memory, distorted through pain and time. Even now, long after the Perrons moved out, the house remains an object of curiosity. Paranormal investigators, skeptics, and thrill-seekers still visit, chasing shadows in hopes of catching something real. But maybe the truth isn't in what we see or hear. Maybe it's in what stays behind, quiet, watching, waiting. After Cindy's chilling confession about the 7 dead soldiers, the family's sense of reality began to collapse. No longer could they dismiss the flickering lights or the vanishing objects as quirks of an old structure. Something intelligent was at play. Something watching, learning, shifting. And worst of all, something responding. Theories flooded their minds. Could the house be built on a burial ground? Was it the site of unmarked graves from forgotten wars? The property dated back to colonial times, long enough for battles, betrayals, and secrets to be buried beneath generations of silence. Perhaps the land itself had memory, a memory soaked in blood. And if those soldiers were real, what did they want? Night after night, the air inside grew heavier. The warmth of the maternal spirits vanished. The once gentle presences seemed to retreat, overtaken by something far more sinister. The whispers became growls. The temperature dropped, even in the middle of July. Doors slammed with fury. The family stopped talking about hauntings and started talking about survival. Andrea, in particular, began to feel the shift. The eyes that once watched with curiosity now burned with hatred. She described the sensation as being hunted, a gaze that pierced through flesh and looked straight into your fear. And worse, something began to follow her into her dreams, a figure, faceless, cold, waiting. Carolyn's physical health began to decline. She grew weak, often dizzy. Bruises appeared with no explanation. One night, She was hurled across the room by an unseen force. That was when the parents realized they were no longer dealing with lost spirits, but something darker, something that didn't just haunt, but attacked. The family reached out to paranormal investigators. Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famed demonologists, visited the house. Lorraine claimed to feel an overwhelming presence of evil, one unlike anything she had encountered. She believed the house wasn't just haunted, it was infested. And the root of it all, in her view, was Bathsheba. But the truth is more complicated. Perhaps Bathsheba was a scapegoat, a name to give shape to the terror. Or perhaps she was just one of many restless souls caught in a web of pain, betrayal, and centuries of unresolved suffering. The house had absorbed it all, every death, every scream, every silence, and still it stood. Today, the Conjuring House is a destination. Paranormal investigators visit with equipment and prayer. Thrill seekers spend the night, hoping for a whisper in the dark. But those who truly understand what happened there know the truth. It isn't about what you see, it's about what you feel. The cold breath on your neck, the heaviness in your chest, the sense that the house is listening and choosing whether to answer.